The whole understanding of astrology is so completely contradictory to the normal Western scientific training. It seemed completely preposterous that the planets could possibly have anything to do with human affairs in any possible way, because it really requires a complete and radical change of worldview. I did eventually find some answers, partly in the work of David Bohm, and also in chaos theory and fractal geometry. David Bohm was a very important physicist because he was a colleague of Einstein's, and he was one of the leaders in quantum physics. He had been a leading researcher. He was at Princeton University, actually worked with Einstein there, before he was exiled because he refused to testify during the McCarthy-era hearings against his scientific mentor, Robert Oppenheimer. Not only was he a very rigorous physicist of the first class, but he also took his quest for truth into other arenas. So he had intensive and extensive dialogues with leading spiritual masters, particularly with Krishnamurti, and also with the Dalai Lama and other spiritual masters, trying to understand what is their perception of reality. And then he would try to reconcile that with what he understood from physics and relativity theory.
I think that my own interest in science, and many of them interest in science, is not entirely separate from what is behind the interest in religion or in philosophy. That is to understand the whole of the universe, the whole of matter, how we originate. All these things which seem to exist independently are merely manifestations of something much deeper.
After 40 years of work on this, he proposed that the nature of reality is what he called a hollow movement. He said the cosmos is a single unbroken wholeness in flowing movement, in which each part of the flow contains the entire flow. And he showed that, first of all, it is a oneness. There is one unitive process, very similar to Plato, who said there is one living being. This hollow movement then has two aspects that he spoke of. One was what he called the implicate order, and one was called the explicate order. The explicate order is that subset of this wholeness that is directly perceptible to the human senses: the eyes, the nose, the taste, the feeling. So the five senses plus the mind, and that's what we would perceive as the normal physical universe. And then the implicate order, he said, is everything else. When we first hear this, we naturally assume that the explicate order is the fundamental reality, right? It's the 100 billion galaxies, each of which has 100 billion stars, the physical universe as we know it. And the implicate order is some kind of ethereal secondary reality. What Bohm found, though, was just the opposite, that the implicate order is the fundamental reality and the explicate order are the details. And the analogy that he used was that the explicate order is like the foam on the waves of the ocean, and the implicate order is the ocean itself. So the implicate order is the foundational reality, and on the surface of that, you have this ephemeral movement of the waves, which when they break give rise to the foam, and that foam is like the nature of the physical universe. It arises and it passes away. And we know this from fundamental particle physics, where we have creation and annihilation of matter going on all the time. So the implicate order refers to the intangibles of life and to all that is beyond our five senses and the mind, but is no less real for being implicate. So what Bohm found was that this understanding of physics is very consistent both with quantum theory as well as with spiritual understanding down through the ages. And in particular, for example, in the Hindu cosmologies, where you have the creation, the preservation, and the destruction of all of creation coming in this form,